Kelly, she was a freshman in FYS who had spent her 18-year-old summer reading Russian novels. Since then, we've had many classes and cups of tea together, and she's been to Russia and taken up Russian language study for the love of a writer. And she's also seen me at my worst as a teacher. Kelly's sight and insight are one thing. What she does with it is another, more astonishing fact. I've never met a person who holds an informed, intelligent opinion and holds her ground so steadily, and yet, at the same time, stays open to the complex possibilities in another person. You will learn shortly that her paper examines the failure of this and the realization of this in two characters in two books. One very good, perhaps angelic man idealizes people and therefore can't love them properly. And one, because he knows firsthand the reality of evil, not only outside of himself but within, loves people in a way that touches the roots of their personhood, that changes their lives, and that gives them knowledge to live by. She can write about this because she lives this way. The book lays bare her own way in the world. I've had the privilege of hours of conversation, of dwelling with her outside the time circuit, and with Fyodor Dostoevsky, who gave me a language and a name for what I have seen in her. Please welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I first want to just thank Professor Perrin for everything she's done. She's been my mentor on this project, and not just this project. She's gone above and beyond the duty with helping me with this. Back last year when I had only mentioned I wanted to do this project about Dostoevsky and maybe it might involve religion, she went ahead and invited Father Tim, a local Orthodox priest, to come to Messiah and have tea and theological discussions with us. I sometimes joke that she seemed more excited about my project than me. And for example, when I came at our first official meeting last February, she had already read The Entire Idiot, and I was trying to figure out a reading schedule. And so through this past year, we've really waded through the depths of Dostoevsky's thoughts together, and this has very much been a collaborative project. I'm indebted to her insights and constant encouragement, and our weekly meetings are something that was not only invaluable to this final project, but time I personally treasured and I'll greatly miss. So thank you. And one of the reasons that we both love Dostoevsky so much is that he isn't afraid to tackle the big issues in his novels, and it requires reader participation in deciphering these spiritual insights. Our weekly meetings were, in a way, as much a devotional as scholarship. Completing this project really blurred the lines for me between what's school and what's spiritual, which are lines that, as Christian academics here at Messiah College, we believe should be blurred. And therefore, if you don't mind, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm a student at Messiah College, and before I start, dedicate this time to God through a short prayer. Our Heavenly Father, how great it is that you are a God who values knowledge and learning. Thank you for the opportunity to study writers such as Dostoevsky as a way to understand what it means to be human and what it means to live in relationship with you. May this presentation honor you, the author of all knowledge. In Christ's holy name, amen. In these two novels, bursting with unrepentant evil, thinly veiled by upper society manners or freely fermenting in dark alleys, Myshkin and Alyosha shine as twin stars of Christian righteousness in a universe of twisted souls. We pin our hopes on these exemplar hearts. Prince Myshkin, the protagonist of The Idiot, arrives from Switzerland with sincerity and a non-judgmental love for Nastasia, a woman exploited by respectable men. This 27-year-old prince seems to serve as an angelic messenger of selfless love to St. Petersburg society driven by destructive passions and desires. Alyosha, from the brothers Karamazov, also appears as a cherub. He's a sensitive 19-year-old boy abandoned by his hedonistic father and raised by strangers. We meet Alyosha at the threshold of entering the monastery and watch him travel through heartache and scandal, such as the murder of his father and the trial of his brother for this murder, with a sympathetic ear towards family and friends. And you think, here are our saints in the midst of sinners. But unsettling knots start forming in our stomachs as our instinctive approval of these heroes is called into question. Myshkin's attempt to redeem Nastasia from her own self pushes her towards rogazine and self-destructive behavior. The final murder of Nastasia and Myshkin's own descent into idiocy challenges our preconceived narrative of good triumphing over evil. Even Alyosha's morality and love seems powerless to prevent the murder of his father or bring all his brothers to faith. Darkness and sin flourishes in the present and precinct of our saints. What can we conclude but that these representatives of Christianity failed? And perhaps we would agree that both Myshkin and Alyosha failed if we were stuck interpreting them as categorically the same, as twin stars of righteousness. The impulse to categorize them in the same box is reasonable, but it downplays significant differences between these two characters. However, only through analyzing them together can we begin to understand the deep and crucial differences that exist, even in their shared characteristics. Both possess uncanny spiritual insight through reading faces and struggle with idealism. Although many authors, especially in the 19th century, used physical description for narrator-given characterization, Dostoevsky turns this writer's strategy into a character trait, as Myshkin and Alyosha's understanding of other people is mediated through the face. This is their main mode of perception, a talent not shared by other characters in the novel. However, Myshkin transforms facial perceptions into a static portrait, while Alyosha remains more attuned to subtlety and change. Additionally, both Myshkin and Alyosha struggle with idealism, although this impulse manifests itself differently in each character. Myshkin's idealism surfaces in his inability and refusal to revise his opinions of others, his first impression of someone's face. He does this in order to preserve his innocence and the innocence of others. Yet, this idealistic tendency remains throughout the novel. Alyosha's idealism develops as a way to escape Karamazov's sin and the trauma of violated innocence. Yet after Zosima, his mentor's death, Alyosha eventually embraces reality. But by recognizing Alyosha's flirtation with idealism, we can understand the circumstantial tragedies in the brothers Karamazov. These small differences in face reading and idealism carry significant consequences in interpreting Dostoevsky's two heroes. A close reading shows that despite the various tragedies, Alyosha's endeavors in the brothers Karamazov cannot be interpreted as a failure in the same sense that Myshkin's can in The Idiot. Myshkin's willful insistence on others' innocence prevents him from recognizing guilt. The strain of preserving his idealism collapses under the reality of sin. Alyosha, however, sows the seeds of redemption by allowing his experience with evil to fertilize redemptive brotherhood based on reality. By the novel's end, early roots of spiritual regeneration sprout, and although, because the future is always kind of open-ended in Dostoevsky, there's no guarantee of a full bloom, the final pages provide perhaps a whiff of brotherhood's future fragrance, redemptive, active love. And here I'm going to be skipping about 20 pages where I analyze Myshkin in depth. So please feel free to ask me any questions after the presentation about Myshkin. And in these next passages, it's mainly Alyosha, but I also compare Myshkin in there too. And I've had to condense a lot of things. So if you want more proof or more text, I know it, just ask me anytime, because I could talk about them all day. Oh yes, and here are all my notes from doing these novels. I read each book, and then after each chapter did a summary and then took notes. And so this book is The Brothers Karamazov, and this is The Idiot. So if you're curious. If you need proof, it's right there. Okay, so in The Idiot, Dostoevsky may have set out with the intention of creating a positively beautiful person, but his hero Myshkin presented an impossible and undesirable model of Christianity. 10 years after publishing The Idiot, Dostoevsky would try again to depict a compelling Christian hero. In 1879, the first chapters of the Brothers Karamazov appeared in print, introducing the world to Alyosha Karamazov, Dostoevsky's revision of Myshkin. Like Myshkin, Alyosha's insight comes through the power of observation. However, Alyosha's sight is calibrated not just to every new meeting, but each moment. He seems predisposed to human variety and complexity. Alyosha shares the same ability to read faces, but he also adapts his opinion based on the minute changes over time. Alyosha's superior face-reading skills surfaced during his interaction with Grushenka, his brother Dmitri's fiancée, the day before Dmitri's trial. When Alyosha first enters the room, he perceives a general spiritual shift in Grushenka by reading her face. Her face was greatly changed. She'd become thin and sallow. Something firm and aware seemed to settle in her eyes. Some spiritual turnabout told in her. A certain steadfast, humble, but good and irrevocable resolution appeared. A small vertical wrinkle came to her forehead between her eyebrows, giving her dear face a look of thoughtfulness concentrated upon itself, which was almost even severe at first glance. There was no trace, for example, of her formal frivolity. In her once proud eyes, there now shone a certain gentleness, although from time to time, nevertheless, those eyes blazed once again with a sort of ominous fire, whenever a certain old anxiety visited her, which had not abated, but had even grown stronger in her heart. Alyosha witnesses a large-scale spiritual development. He sees on Grushenka's face that her life has now taken a different trajectory, one marked by humility and love. However, he's also aware of some darker nuances in her face. Instead of creating an idealistic image of a repentant and saved woman, Alyosha observes that an old anxiety not only returns, but returns with increased power. Grushenka has simultaneously moved towards spiritual revival and towards an increased and harmful habit of jealousy. These complex observations of mixed motives and conflicting spiritual development elude Myshkin in The Idiot, because he tends towards overarching judgment about people's development. His first insights when reading the Epanchin girls' faces do possess some nuances. I explained that earlier. But he doesn't observe the dynamics of their or of anyone else's development through time. For example, Myshkin views Nastasia as descending down a linear path from a strange but reasonable love of Rogozin to insanity. He never allows that Nastasia might be acting with sharp, cruel calculation while simultaneously suffering from overwhelming and chaotic emotional turmoil. Additionally, Myshkin views Aglaya as some pure-hearted source of light, and he can't see how his continuing relationship with Nastasia, while almost engaged to Aglaya, provokes Aglaya's jealousy. Alyosha, however, can adapt his understanding of someone's spiritual journey from even momentary, fleeting changes in the face. In the same scene with Grushenka, Alyosha notices that when she talks about Katerina, who is Dmitri's former fiancée, and therefore her rival, that her face became distorted. Alyosha was grieved to see that her face, which had been meek and quietly joyful, suddenly becomes sullen and wicked. The face is constantly dynamic, mirroring the process of the soul. Even though a person may be on a new path following a general direction, human psychology doesn't fit into neat categories. There's a constant dialogue between the evil and good within us all, and even as we move towards another goal. Alyosha's keen observations are capable of conceiving a person as both being and becoming, which gives Alyosha an advantage in understanding human nature and responding correctly. Alyosha's understanding of the face is rooted in time, and he resists the temptation to turn people into static portraits of his ideal, as Myshkin often does. Therefore, at the end of the novel, we trust Alyosha's firm declaration that his brother Dmitri is innocent based on the look on his face. Although the prosecution finds this observation woefully unsubstantial in a legal sense, we, as the readers, trust Alyosha perceives the truth, that Dmitri didn't kill his father, because in the past, Alyosha recognized the sincerity of Dmitri's desire to kill his father. The willingness to believe momentary, intense, even evil desires of others testifies to the fact that Alyosha, unlike Myshkin, does not naively blind himself to the unpleasant facets of people he loves, make excuses for them, or absolutize certain characteristics such as childlike goodness and suffering. To be fair, Alyosha too sometimes eagerly predicts determined actions for people, which could be interpreted as a denial of a person's open-endedness. One such instance occurs when discussing a mistake with Lise, and Lise is Alyosha's childhood friend and on-and-off fiancé. Earlier in the day, Alyosha offered the proud and destitute Captain Sneregioff money from Katerina to atone for Dmitri's misbehavior, and the man refused to receive any monetary compensation. Alyosha theorizes that it's better that the captain first rejected the money, because after the captain has satisfied his honor today, he will take the money tomorrow when offered again. Alyosha exclaims in a sort of rapture that this time he will take it. At this moment, Alyosha falls into the trap of wanting to impose the best reading on the situation, as Myshkin often does. This moment, however, is a fleeting, youthful exuberance flagged by the fact that during the conversation, Alyosha and Lise fall into raptures, a word which, when repeated by Dostoevsky, often alerts the reader to overindulgent emotions. Yet, even in the midst of this rapture, Alyosha becomes cognizant of his youth and inexperience. Lise and Alyosha want to help and look after people, but Alyosha questions his ability. He says, "Yes, let's, Lise, I'm ready. Only, personally, I'm not quite ready. I'm sometimes very impatient, and I sometimes don't see things." The lack of readiness is explained partly by the lack of seeing. Maturity and the ability to look after people is correctly tied back to the ability to observe, and based on the rest of the novel, observe the momentary changes of a person's spiritual condition as seen in the face. Alyosha's face-reading skills show that he is better adapted to reality than Myshkin, whereas Myshkin's responses to the face exposes the prince's idolizing tendencies. Alyosha's perceptions add to his label as a realist. However, Alyosha's tendency towards realism is not a static characteristic either. The temptation to escape a difficult reality by manufacturing ideals also plagues Alyosha. We meet him in the midst of this struggle as he contemplates becoming a monk. He set out on this path because it alone struck him at the time and presented him all at once with a whole ideal way out for his soul, struggling from darkness towards the light of love. In Alyosha's case, pursuit of the ideal is a conscious escape from reality of his own sinful nature and that around him. Although good, that is, loving, caring, sensitive to the needs of others, Alyosha is not innocent like Myshkin. First, Alyosha's innocence was violated by the sins of his father. The first chapter enumerating Theodore's lifestyle could not have created the loving environment that children need. His mother also suffered from a nervous condition, and his father shamelessly committed adultery with every woman he could, even in the presence of his wife. When Alyosha's mother died, he was ignored until rescued and sent away from his family house. Although we are told that his positive attitude conquered all, and he fit in well with other boys, such early encounters with evil affect Alyosha's knowledge about the world. However, the reader isn't left to infer the deep wounds of family sin. It is on shocking display in the dining room scene with his father, Theodore, and his brother, Ivan, in Book 3, Chapter 8. Theodore talks flippantly about how he treated Alyosha's mother. Theodore explains how he would suddenly crawl and kiss her feet to purposely send her into that little laugh, a showering, tinkling, soft, nervous, peculiar little laugh that would turn into shrieking the next day. He also recalls taking Alyosha's mother to the monastery after she demanded Theodore maintain his honor when someone slapped him. He had the Holy Fathers reprimand her to humble her. But then he has the audacity to swear, "But honest to God, Alyosha, I never offended my little shrieker." Theodore continues his disrespectful tirade by relating the time that he smashed her precious icon that depicts the face of Mary, the Mother of God. This caused Alyosha's mother to fall to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. As Fyodor recounts his violation of the icon, he simultaneously violates Alyosha's most precious memory, that is, his memory of his mother praying to that icon. As Fyodor is speaking, Alyosha himself falls to the ground, shaking. Evil has been foisted upon Alyosha from his family, but he also intimately understands evil from within. He, too, is a Karamazov. When Dmitri explains his history of Katerina Ivanova, Dmitri freely admits all his sinful inclinations. I love depravity. I also love the shame of depravity. I loved cruelty. Am I not a bedbug, an evil insect, in short, a Karamazov? Dmitri notices Alyosha's blushing, and he believes it's because Alyosha's embarrassed at Dmitri's deeds. He reassures Alyosha that he's telling him these things because he trusts him. Alyosha's response, however, isn't one of tolerance, but understanding a shared nature. I blush not at your words and not at your deeds, but because I'm the same as you. The steps are all the same. I'm on the lowest, and you are above, somewhere on the 13th. That's how I see it. But it's all one and the same, all exactly the same sort of thing. Whoever steps on the lowest step will surely step on the highest. Alyosha's personal experience thus supports Dmitri's earlier characterization of Karamazovs as sensual insects, and his observation that even in Alyosha, an angel, the same insect lives and stirs up storms in his blood. The Karamazov in Alyosha also surfaces in his discussion with his other brother, Ivan, in the tavern, and it reveals another aspect of sin, vengeance. Discussing the suffering of children, Ivan asks Alyosha what should be done with the general who orders dogs tear a defenseless child to pieces in front of his mother. Alyosha's response, shoot him, pleases Ivan. Bravo, a fine monk you are. See what a little devil is sitting in your heart, Alyosha Karamazov. Although Alyosha tries to backtrack and say his answer is absurd, the expression of his hot-blooded human vindictiveness remains. Moreover, Alyosha repeats Ivan's intellectual revolt. During their conversation in the tavern, Ivan claims, it's not that I don't accept God, Alyosha. I just most respectfully return him the ticket. That is to say, reject the world that God created. Alyosha labels Ivan's logic rebellious, and yet a few chapters later, Alyosha apparently changes his mind when Ivan's argument echoes from his own lips. Crushed by his mentor, Zosima's death, and how quickly everyone doubts his elder's righteous reputation, Alyosha tells Rakitin, the apostate monk, I do not rebel against my God, I simply do not accept his will. Oh, there we go. So. Perhaps the most telling personal experience of evil is Alyosha's decision to visit Grushenka after Zosima's death. Rakitin is delighted to find Alyosha upset and even snappish, just like other mortals. Alyosha agrees, apparently apathetically, to eat meat and drink vodka to break his monastic vows. He even agrees to visit Grushenka, a fallen woman and the cause of the rivalry between his father and his brother Dmitri. Alyosha's motivations remain hidden until he confesses to Grushenka, I came here looking for a wicked soul. I was drawn to that because I was low and wicked myself. His motives moved beyond apathy to active pursuit of evil. The contrast with Myshkin is striking. Though Myshkin associates with questionable society, he focuses on the good, and he never desires to purposely ruin himself. Alyosha does. These Karamazov impulses towards sensual pleasure, intellectual rebellion, and self-ruin simmer in Alyosha's heart and sometimes boil over. Alyosha's family history and his own sinful nature compelled him to seek salvation sequestered within the walls of the monastery. Although motivated by a realistic understanding of evil within himself, Alyosha turns to an ideal solution. Zosima realizes this motivation and challenges his idealistic impulse to enter the monastery as an escape. Zosima requires Alyosha leave and take responsibility for his family. You are more needed there. There is no peace there. You will serve and be of use. If demons raise their heads, recite a prayer. And no, my dear son, the elder liked to call him that, that from now on this is not the place for you. Remember that, young man. As soon as God grants me to depart, leave the monastery, leave it for good. He further encourages Alyosha, go and hurry, be near your brothers, not just one, but both of them. Alyosha must leave the monastery and abandon his ideal way out in order to help other people. The monastery isn't the only ideal that Alyosha pursues. Alyosha also transforms Zosima into an ideal who deserves his unlimited devotion even at the expense of other people. Alyosha considers the elder a saint, keeper of God's truth in the eyes of the people. However, his opinion cements into an unquestioning faith in the miraculous power of the elder. Alyosha thus places unrealistic expectations on the influence of Zosima, his mentor. He is holy. In his heart there is the secret renewal for all, the power that will finally establish the truth on earth, and all will be holy and will love one another. There will be neither rich nor poor, neither exalted nor humiliated, but all will be like the children of God, and the true kingdom of Christ will come. That was the dream in Alyosha's heart. However, Alyosha's dream is not based in reality. It's naive and idealistic to expect that just one man can usher in the complete kingdom of God. It's a utopian dream. Ironically, Zosima himself warns against love and dreams when talking to Madame Kolokov. I'm sorry that I cannot say anything more comforting, for active love is harsh and a fearful thing compared to love and dreams. Love and dreams thirst for an immediate action, quickly performed and with everyone watching. Indeed, it will go as far as the giving even of one's life, provided that it does not take long, but it is soon over, as on stage, and everyone is looking on and praising. Zosima's words are reminiscent of an earlier description of Alyosha from the beginning of the novel. The narrator illuminates Alyosha's romantic nature. Add to this that he was partly a young man of Itan, that is, honest by nature, demanding the truth, seeking it and believing in it, and in that belief demanding immediate participation in with it, with all his strength of soul, demanding an immediate deed, with an unfailing desire to sacrifice everything, even life. Alyosha simply chose the opposite path from all the others, but with the same thirst for an immediate deed. The phrase, thirst for an immediate deed, strengthens the link between these two passages. Therefore, Alyosha's nature should fall under Zosima's critique. His thirst for an immediate deed constitutes the grandiose, impulsive public love in dreams. Although many of the traits ascribed to Alyosha in this passage are positive, honest, truth-seeking, self-sacrificial, the thirst for immediacy undermines their value. Alyosha's decision to enter the monastery thus carries the negative quality of love in dreams. Amid the description of Alyosha's nature, we get a rare interlude of the narrator commenting on contemporary issues. Alyosha is labeled a young man of our time, and our time was the late 1870s, the age of political assassination attempts, even on the Tsar's life. Dostoevsky conveys sympathy for the ardent nature of these youths, but obviously critiques their thirst for an immediate deed. Although, unfortunately, these young men do not understand that the sacrifice of life is, perhaps, the easiest of all sacrifices in many cases. Well, to sacrifice, for example, 5 or 6 years of their exuberantly youthful life to hard, difficult studies, to learning, in order to increase tenfold their strength, to secure the very truth and very deed that they loved and set out to accomplish, such sacrifice is often almost beyond the strength of many of them. Alyosha is labeled a young man of our times, and thus Dostoevsky places Alyosha exactly in this category with those young socialist anarchists who idealistically dream of an immediate action. Therefore, at the beginning of the novel, Alyosha has something to learn. He must be converted to a new type of love, a realistic Christianity espoused by Zosima that takes time, effort, and discernment. Whereas active love is labor and perseverance, and for some people, perhaps a whole science. Before Zosima's death, Alyosha hasn't mastered the practice of active love. Instead of engaging with reality, Alyosha turns Zosima into an ideal that consumes all of his love and attention. That was just it. The entirety of the love for all and all that lay hidden in Alyosha's young and pure heart then and during the whole previous years, was at times as if wholly concentrated, perhaps even incorrectly, mainly on just one being, at least in the strongest impulses of his heart, on his beloved elder, now deceased. True, this being had stood before him as an indisputable ideal for so long that all his youthful powers and all their yearnings could not but turn to this ideal exclusively, in some moments, even to the forgetting of all and all. Alyosha hasn't fully comprehended that his creation of ideals, specifically the ideal of Zosima, a holy man so different from his own father, obstructs true active love. Right on the heels of this quote, we get a parenthetical explanation of the consequences for Alyosha's devotion to this ideal. He himself remembered later on that painful day, he quite forgot his brother Dmitri, about whom he had been so worried and grieved the day before. He also forgot to take the 200 rubles to Alyosha's father, as he had also so fervently intended to do the day before. Alyosha's concern for his ideal, Zosima, actually keeps Alyosha from seeking out Dmitri the night of the murder, which would have given Dmitri an alibi. But had Alyosha sought out his brother, Dmitri wouldn't have even needed an alibi. Alyosha's conversation would have interrupted Dmitri's crazed journey and prevented him from going to Fyodor's house. Without Dmitri arriving and knocking Grigory, the old servant, down, Smerdyakov, Fyodor's illegitimate son, but also his servant, wouldn't have seized the opportunity to murder Fyodor. Alyosha turning Zosima into an ideal resulted in Alyosha failing in his brotherly duties, which led to his father's murder. After Zosima's death, the monk's rotting corpse was necessary in order to force Alyosha to abandon his idealization of Zosima. Saints' bodies were not expected to decompose. Although the decaying body didn't threaten Alyosha's belief in Zosima's saintliness, his sense of justice was deeply offended by the cynical response of other people. The monks and citizens' speed in suspecting Alyosha's spiritual mentor of great sin shattered the notion that Zosima's legacy would shape the world. Zosima would not be that saint who is the keeper of God's truth in the eyes of the people. Thus, the stinking body destroyed Alyosha's ideal. For those first few hours after losing his ideal, Alyosha starts on a moral down spiral, and Rakitin, a cynical hypocrite, is delighted with every concession that pulls him further and further away from a holy lifestyle. Alyosha ends up at the house of the woman whose charm seduced both his father and his oldest brother, the woman who inflamed the tensions that paved the way for family hatred and patricide. However, something completely unexpected occurs during this visit. When Grushenka discovers Alyosha's mentor passed away, she expresses shock and sympathy and actually stops trying to seduce him. The elder Zosima died, Grushenka exclaimed. "Oh Lord, I didn't know." She crossed herself piously. "Lord, but what am I doing now, sitting on his lap?" She suddenly gave a start as if in fright and jumped off his knees at once and sat down on the sofa. This unexpected moment of sympathy revives Alyosha. He confesses, "I came here looking for a wicked soul. I was drawn to that because I was low and wicked myself, but I found a true sister. I found a treasure, a loving soul. She spared me just now. I'm speaking of you, Agrafena Alexandrovna. You restored my soul just now." Grushenka's sisterly kindness exemplifies the redemptive nature of brotherhood. Sibling bonds and brotherhood encapsulates the Christ-like love in the novel. Zosima's teaching centers on active love, which creates this brotherhood even without family ties. According to Zosima, a universal brotherhood was the original intention of mankind, and it is only because of sin that the world lives in fragmented isolation. Moreover, Zosima's first lesson in theology was not taught by a priest or by his father, but by his brother, Markel. If there is any redemption in the brothers Karamazov, it stems from brotherhood. A desire for brotherhood is not exclusively found just in the brothers Karamazov. In The Idiot, too, Myshkin seeks to establish brotherhood. Myshkin agrees to exchange cross necklaces with Rogozin, the man who would eventually murder Nastasia. "You want to exchange crosses? Very well, Parfyan," or Rogozin. "If so, I'm glad. We'll be brothers." Exchanging crosses customarily symbolize becoming spiritual brothers. Additionally, when Myshkin writes to Aglaia, remembering her as light, he says, "I wrote it as to a sister and signed it as a brother." Perhaps Myshkin never changes his desire to be Aglaia's brother, despite his marriage proposal, since Myshkin seems to lack passionate love and sexual desire. Myshkin also tries to create brotherly community by accepting anyone who seeks his company. However, no one responds wholeheartedly to his offer of brotherhood, because Myshkin cannot truly understand people when he abstracts them from momentary images into ideals. Additionally, his innocence, which is admired by all, alienates him from society. Conscious of their own evil, other characters can't fathom true camaraderie between themselves and a man, such as Myshkin, free from intentional sinful desires and blind to those desires in others. Alyosha is more successful. Alyosha's sensitivity to momentary changes in the face and his willingness to adapt his opinion of a person gives him the ability to be surprised by Grushenka's act of brotherhood. Because Alyosha remains open to a new face of the other, he could see Grushenka's sympathy as sincere, despite her past actions. Grushenka's sisterly kindness proves to Alyosha that even though his ideal, Zosima and his legacy, would affect the world and usher in the kingdom of God, suffered corruption, the goal of Zosima's teaching, active love and brotherhood, lives on and is found in unexpected, non-ideal places and people. To notice these flashes of brotherhood in a fallen world requires a finely tuned sensitivity to spiritual conditions and changes. Alyosha names Grushenka a true sister, which both recognizes and creates redemptive connection of brotherhood, as this moment also begins Grushenka's revival. Alyosha's expression of brotherly love and solidarity breaks down her protective walls of pride. "He called me his sister, I'll never forget it. He's the first to pity and the only one, that's what. All my life I've been waiting for one such as you. I knew someone like that would come and forgive me. I believed that someone would love me, a dirty woman, not only for my shame." Later in Makroya, with Dmitri, she recalls this moment again. "Alyosha said something to me today that I'll never forget." By remembering Alyosha's words later, Grushenka reveals how deeply Alyosha's brotherhood made an impression on her heart. This brotherly connection is maintained throughout the novel, as Alyosha often visits Grushenka while awaiting Dmitri's trial, and Grushenka opened her heart to him alone and constantly asked his advice. Besides the unique ability to perceive goodness in others and the momentary decisions that exemplify brotherhood, Alyosha creates a genuine connection with others because of his experience with evil. The critic Alexander Gibson agrees that Alyosha is uniquely equipped to create redemptive Christian brotherhood. Alyosha is programmed to be the answer because he is not a perfect knight or pure fool, and these are terms which are often applied to Myshkin, but because he is a Karamazov. Part of Alyosha's Karamazov nature creates awareness of evil in himself and the world. This awareness cultivates a sense of solidarity through which Alyosha can influence the people he's around. Myshkin's innocence, however, creates an insurmountable distance between his spirit and that of others. His attempt at brotherhood was a bridge with support only from one side, and the tension proved too much for his innocence to handle, and it collapsed. He collapsed. After Nastasia's death, Myshkin fell into senseless idiocy. However, the only person Myshkin's behavior has a notable, lasting impact on is Yevgeny Radomsky, a family friend of the Impanchins. After Myshkin falls into the catonic state of idiocy, Yevgeny pays for Myshkin's health care in the Swiss sanatorium and even periodically visits the prince. Additionally, the epilogue points towards Yevgeny's growing attachment to Vera Lukyanova. Though on the fringes of the plot, Vera's conduct represents humble, selfless love, and Yevgeny's budding relationship with her can be seen as the result of Myshkin's influence on Yevgeny. Interestingly enough, Yevgeny is the main critic of Myshkin and holds him responsible for misreading faces. Yevgeny berates Myshkin with fierce indignation over his treatment of Aglaia. Is it sufficient to cry out, "I'm to blame"? You're to blame, and yet you persist. And where was your heart then, your Christian heart? You saw her face at that moment. Tell me, did she suffer less than that one, than your other one, her rival? How could you see it and allow it? How? He views Myshkin as a fallible individual who should be held responsible for his actions. Yevgeny therefore places Myshkin in the same moral category as himself. They also share something else in common, failing to win Aglaya. Yevgeny therefore perceives a connection between himself and Myshkin. This shared connection creates genuine brotherhood, a bridge between two men strong enough to allow Myshkin's positive attributes, such as humility and compassion, to cross over and influence Yevgeny. On the other hand, Alyosha influences many people. Another brotherhood Alyosha creates outside of his family is the boys who visit Alyoshinka, the poor sick child of Captain Snerigov. Alyosha develops a unique relationship with one of the boys, Kolya. At first, Kolya refrains from visiting Alyoshinka out of pride. He dreams of being the hero who finds not only the dog that Alyoshinka believed dead, but who also teaches that dog new tricks. Additionally, Kolya wants to appear aloof and not too eager in meeting Alyosha. However, Alyosha disarms this pretentious and toxically self-centered 14-year-old boy, and they become friends. Kolya explains it's because Alyosha treats him as an equal. Additionally, Kolya also perceives that their equality is based on shared insecurity and faults. Oh, how I love you and value you right now, precisely because you too are ashamed of something with me, because you're just like me. Dostoevsky also chooses to end the novel with Alyosha speaking to Kolya and this community of boys. Thus, the lasting image we have of Alyosha is deeply entwined with brotherhood. Myshkin's innocence and refusal to change his ideal image hurts his ability to respond in the moment and connect with others. In contrast, Alyosha's ability to revise his opinion and acknowledge guilt creates genuine brotherhood. Although both struggle with creating ideals, Myshkin's inflexibility leads to a mental collapse, while Alyosha is saved from moral down-spiraling because of his sensitivity to the complex and dynamic personhood of others. Although Alyosha's first pursuit of ideals has grave consequences in the book, we have evidence that he does positively affect the people around him. Alyosha inspires spiritual changes and gives advice with realistic understanding. One example is the advice he gives to Dmitri at the end of the novel, which I am going to skip for sake of time, but you can ask later. So, Alyosha establishes a genuine connection between many characters throughout the novel, which enables his righteous voice to be heard and listened to. We have faith that Alyosha will continue to positively affect other people through active love. Although Myshkin and Alyosha share similar Christian characteristics such as humility and love, their difference in perception and their experience with evil drastically change their ability to interact with the world. For Dostoevsky, the standard of righteousness is not an isolated example of innocence, but someone who intimately understands evil outside of and within himself, and who, in embracing the ideas of guilt and forgiveness, can become the brother of all. Exerting influence in the world is not a matter of preserving innocence, but transforming the world's brokenness through redemptive brotherhood. This living out of active love is a difficult process and requires constant revisioning of the world, ourselves, and other people. The stories of Myshkin and Alyosha teach us that to create brotherhood, we must have the courage to face evil and replace our devotion to ideals with discernment grounded